My name is Hannah. I am 26 years old, and the night my parents decided I was a thief started like any other family dinner. Too much food, too much silence. The table was set perfectly, plates warmed, rice still steaming, but no one rushed to eat. My mom kept adjusting the serving spoon like it was crooked. My dad sat at the head of the table, hands folded, staring at a spot near his glass. My younger sibling sat across from me, shoulders rounded, eyes fixed on their plate. I noticed the quiet before anyone spoke. It felt intentional. I took a bite anyway. The food tasted fine, but my stomach tightened after the first chew. I had learned over the years that when my parents cooked this much and no one talked, something was coming. My mom put her fork down. "We need to clear something up," she said. The words landed softly, but they sucked the air out of the room. My dad nodded once. "Some money is missing." I blinked. "Missing?" "From the savings," my mom said. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle. That scared me more than yelling ever did. I waited for more context. An explanation, a question. None came. My dad finally looked up. "You were the last one who had access." For a moment, my brain stalled. The sentence made sense grammatically, but not emotionally. "You're saying What?" I asked. My mom crossed her arms. "We're not accusing. We're just trying to understand." That was the first lie of the night. "Understand what?" I said slowly. "That I took it?" My dad exhaled through his nose. "Hannah, don't make this harder." "Harder." I glanced around the table. My aunt avoided my eyes. My cousin stared at the wall like it had suddenly become fascinating, and my sibling stayed very still, hands folded, eyes down. Not surprised, not confused, just quiet. "I didn't take any money," I said. My voice sounded far away to my own ears. "I don't even know what amount you're talking about." My mom tilted her head. "You've been stressed lately." I stared at her. "Stress doesn't make people steal. It explains things," she replied. "Explains, not proves." I felt something sharp press into my chest. "Did you check the transaction history?" "We checked enough," my dad said. "And we don't want excuses." Excuses. I set my fork down carefully, afraid that if I moved too fast, I might shatter something I couldn't put back together. "I have helped this family for years," I said. "I've paid bills. I've loaned money I never asked for back. And now you're sitting here treating me like I'm a suspect?" My dad's jaw tightened. "Don't turn this into a performance." That hurt more than the accusation. I looked across the table again, straight at my sibling. They did not look up. And in that moment, I understood something I wish I hadn't. They knew. They knew exactly where the money went, and they were letting the spotlight burn me instead. My hands curled into fists under the table. "Someone here knows what happened," I said quietly. My mom shook her head. "This defensiveness is exactly what worries us." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "You decided it was me before I even opened my mouth," I said. My dad leaned back. "If you have nothing to hide, then prove it." There it was. Not a conversation. A verdict. I stood up slowly. The chair legs scraped against the floor, loud in the silence. My sibling flinched. Just a little. "I didn't take your money," I said, "but I will clear my name." My dad scoffed. "How?" I looked at the person who still hadn't said a word. "The truth doesn't need defending," I said. "It just needs time." Their face went pale. I grabbed my bag and walked away from the table, my plate untouched. Behind me, no one called my name. No one asked me to stay. That was when I realized something else. They weren't afraid of losing the money. They were afraid of losing the version of the story where blaming me was easiest. And I decided, right then, that I was done being convenient. By the time I got home that night, my hands were still shaking. I dropped my bag by the door and stood in the kitchen without turning on the lights. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, steady and indifferent. I leaned against the counter and tried to slow my breathing, but my chest felt tight. like the accusation had followed me home and settled there. It shouldn't have surprised me. That was the part that hurt the most. Because if I was honest with myself, my parents accusing me didn't come out of nowhere. It came from years of quiet decisions they had made about who I was in this family and what I was for. Growing up, I was the responsible one, not because I wanted to be, but because someone always needed to be. When something broke, I was asked what I had done. When something went wrong, I was asked why I hadn't noticed sooner. Responsibility followed me like a shadow I never asked for. My sibling was different. They were fragile, according to my parents. Sensitive, under a lot of pressure. Every mistake they made came with an explanation already attached, like a tag no one bothered to remove. They didn't mean it. They were overwhelmed. They would do better next time. There was always a next time. When I forgot a bill, it was a lecture. When they forgot one, it was a misunderstanding. When I needed help, it was a burden. When they needed help, it was an emergency. I learned early how to stay quiet, not because I didn't have things to say, but because saying them never changed the outcome. It just made things tense, and somehow the tension always landed back on me. So I became careful. I double-checked everything. I kept receipts. I remembered dates, not because I was sneaky, because I was tired of being wrong by default. That night, standing alone in my kitchen, I realized my parents hadn't accused me because of evidence. They accused me because the role was already written. I was the one who could handle it, the one who would explain herself, the one who wouldn't fall apart in a way that made them uncomfortable. The thought made my throat burn. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I just logged into the family account the same way I had dozens of times before, back when helping was still expected of me. The transaction history loaded slowly. Rows of numbers, dates, times. I stared at them longer than I needed to, letting the shock drain out of my system. Then I started reading carefully, not looking for proof of my innocence, looking for patterns. And there it was. A withdrawal time that didn't match my schedule. A location I hadn't been near that day. A small detail that would have been easy to miss if you weren't used to being blamed and therefore trained to notice everything. My heart didn't race. It settled, because for the first time that night, something made sense. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark, replaying the dinner in my head. My mom's calm voice, my dad's certainty, my siblings' silence. That silence bothered me more the longer I sat with it. They hadn't defended me. They hadn't looked surprised. They hadn't even looked confused. They had done what they always did when trouble passed close to them. They stayed still and let it move on. I thought about all the times I had stepped in before, covered for them, smoothed things over, explained away behavior my parents didn't want to deal with. I thought I was being kind. I thought I was being loyal. But loyalty only ever moved one direction in this family. I pulled out my phone and opened a note. I didn't title it anything dramatic, just the date. Then I wrote down what happened at dinner. Who said what? Who didn't say anything at all? I wrote down the transaction time and the location. I didn't jump to conclusions. I didn't add feelings. Just facts. It felt strange, documenting my own life like that. Like I was stepping outside myself and becoming a witness instead of a participant. But something about it steadied me. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I wasn't even planning confrontation. I was planning clarity, because I knew something my parents didn't. I knew that the truth wouldn't explode. It wouldn't storm the room and demand attention. It would sit quietly, just like the real culprit had at that table. And when the time was right, it would speak. The next few days passed without another word from my parents. No calls, no texts, no apologies wrapped in concern. Just silence. At first, I thought that meant they were reconsidering, that maybe they had checked the account again, that maybe someone had asked the obvious question they should have asked at dinner. But silence in my family never meant reflection. It meant waiting. I went about my routine like nothing had happened. Work, groceries, laundry. Normal things that felt slightly unreal, like I was watching myself move through them from a few steps away. Every now and then, my phone buzzed, and my heart jumped, only to sink when it was just a notification from an app or a coworker. I kept thinking about my sibling, not what they had done, what they hadn't. They hadn't defended me. They hadn't looked shocked. They hadn't even asked what money my parents were talking about. They had sat there, quiet and careful, like someone who knew exactly how much noise was safe to make. That image stayed with me. A few days later, my mom called. Her voice was softer than it had been at dinner, controlled. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" I asked. "About clearing the air," she replied. "Your father and I are trying to handle this calmly. Handle this." I agreed to stop by the house the next evening, not because I wanted to explain myself, because I wanted to watch. When I walked in, the house smelled the same as always: cleaning spray and cooked food. My dad was in the living room pretending to watch TV. My mom stood in the kitchen, arms folded, and my siblings sat at the table, scrolling on their phone. The same positions as dinner. Different day. We sat down, and my mom started talking immediately about trust, about disappointment, about how stressful money had been lately. She never once asked me where I had been or how I was holding up. Then she said it again. "We just don't understand how the money disappeared." I didn't interrupt. My dad nodded along. "If you know something, now is the time." I waited. My sibling kept scrolling. That's when I noticed it. Their hand froze when my mom mentioned the amount. Just for a second. Then they scrolled again like nothing happened. A small thing, but I had learned to pay attention to small things. I leaned back in my chair and said nothing. My parents filled the silence with theories, possibilities, everything except the one sitting quietly between us. My sibling didn't say a word, not to defend me, not to offer help, not to express confusion. They didn't even look at me, and that told me everything. After a while, my mom sighed dramatically. "This is exhausting." I nodded. "It is." My dad frowned. "Do you have anything to say?" I met his eyes. "Not yet." The room felt uncomfortable after that. My parents weren't used to me withholding. They were used to explanations, tears, reassurance. I stood up. "I'll let you know when I do." As I walked toward the door, my sibling finally looked up. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw it clearly. Fear. Not guilt, not shame. Fear of being seen. I didn't confront them. I didn't ask questions. I just gave them a look that said I knew, and I left. Back home, I opened my notes again. I added what I had observed. The pause. The timing. The way their hand tightened around the phone when the amount was mentioned. Still no accusations. Just patterns. Because people who expect to be protected behave differently from people who expect to be blamed. And my sibling had spent their whole life learning how to stay protected. I closed my notebook and sat quietly, letting the realization settle. The money wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had been carrying blame for so long that no one even noticed when it didn't belong to me. But they would. Soon, I didn't confront anyone after that. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to lay everything out on the table, to point at the transaction times, to ask my sibling why their phone froze when the amount was mentioned, to demand my parents finally look in the right direction. But I knew better. In my family, the loudest person lost. The calm one was dismissed. And the truth, when shouted too early, was treated like emotion instead of fact. So I stayed quiet. I let the days pass. I answered my parents' occasional messages with neutral replies. "I'm busy. We'll talk later." Nothing that sounded defensive. Nothing that sounded angry. I needed them comfortable. I needed them sure they were right. Late at night, when the world felt smaller and quieter, I worked. I pulled up the account again. I printed the transaction history instead of just staring at it on a screen. Dates, times, Locations? I highlighted nothing at first. I just read. Then I cross-checked. I opened my calendar and matched days, work shifts, meetings, commutes. I looked at where I had been when the money moved and where the transaction said it happened. They didn't line up. Not once. I screenshot everything. I saved copies in more than one place. I emailed them to myself with neutral subject lines. Nothing dramatic. Just data. Then I looked at my siblings' patterns. Not stalking, not spying. Just noticing. They had always been careless in small ways, leaving receipts in jacket pockets, forgetting to log out of shared devices, talking too much when they thought no one was listening, then shutting down completely when attention turned toward them. One evening, I stopped by the house unannounced. Not to accuse, to observe. My sibling was at the kitchen counter, scrolling on their phone. When they saw me, they jumped slightly, then forced a smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Hey," they said. "Didn't know you were coming." "I was nearby," I replied. "Just grabbing something I left." They nodded too quickly. As I moved through the house, I noticed a folded receipt on the counter. My heart didn't race. I didn't grab it. I just glanced. The date caught my eye. It matched. I kept my face neutral and walked past it. When I came back through the kitchen, the receipt was gone. That told me more than if it had stayed. Back home, I added another note, another timestamp, another small piece. It felt strange, collecting evidence against someone I had once protected without question. Someone I had covered for when my parents were angry. Someone I had explained away because it was easier than letting them face consequences. I thought about that a lot. How protection, when given without limits, teaches people they don't have to be careful. That someone else will always take the fall. I stopped sleeping well, not because I was scared, because I was alert. Every sound, every message, every interaction felt like it carried weight now. I was no longer reacting. I was waiting. My parents called again near the end of the week. "We've talked to a few people," my mom said. "Everyone agrees this doesn't look good." "For who?" I asked. She hesitated. "For you." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Okay." That threw her off. "Well," she continued, "we're thinking of sitting down with everyone, just to get closure." Closure, I agreed. Because closure only works when everyone has the same information. And soon, they would. I spent the night before the meeting organizing everything. I didn't rehearse speeches. I didn't plan emotional appeals. I made a folder, digital and physical, clear labels, clean timelines. I practiced saying nothing, because proof doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be believed. It waits. And the next time we all sat at that table, the silence would belong to someone else. The family meeting was scheduled for Sunday. My mom called it a reset. My dad called it necessary. I didn't call it anything at all. I just showed up. When I arrived, everyone was already there. My parents sat side by side on the couch, close enough to look united. My aunt and cousin took the armchairs, and my siblings sat at the far end, half hidden, phone face down on their knee. They smiled at me when I walked in. That was new. Not warm, not kind, careful. I took the empty chair near the door. I wanted space. I wanted a clear path out if I needed it. Years of being blamed had trained me to always know where the exit was. My mom started talking immediately about family, about trust, about how painful it was to feel betrayed by your own child. She didn't look at me when she said that. My dad nodded along. "We just want honesty," he said. "That's all." I stayed quiet. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. "So, has anything new come up?" My mom sighed. "Nothing that clears things up." I felt my sibling glance at me. Just once. Quick. Then back to their hands. My dad turned toward me. "This is your chance, Hannah." "To do what?" I asked calmly. "To explain yourself." I folded my hands in my lap. "I already did." "That's not enough," my mom said. "People don't just take money for no reason." I almost smiled. Because she was right. People take money when they think they can get away with it. I let the conversation continue without me. The theories grew more confident as the room warmed to them. Stress, entitlement, resentment. Someone even mentioned that I had been distant lately, as if distance itself was evidence. No one asked my sibling a single question. They sat there, quiet and untouched, exactly where they had learned to sit their whole life. I watched them instead of defending myself. Their foot bounced when my mom mentioned the bank. Their jaw tightened when my dad talked about consequences. Their hand hovered over their phone and then pulled back, like they were afraid of being seen doing the wrong thing at the wrong moment. They were unraveling, just a little, and my parents didn't notice. At one point, my dad stood up. "If this keeps going unresolved," he said, "we may have to involve the bank. Maybe even make this official." My siblings' heads snapped up, just for a second. Then they nodded. "Yeah," they said quickly. "That might be smart." The room stilled. That was the first thing they had said all night. I looked at them then, really looked, and I saw it. Panic barely contained. They weren't afraid of the truth coming out eventually. They were afraid of it coming out the wrong way. In a way they couldn't control. In a system that didn't care who was fragile or stressed or protected. I leaned back and finally spoke. "I think that's a good idea," I said. Everyone turned toward me. My mom frowned. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "Let's involve the bank." The confidence in my voice startled them. My dad hesitated. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I have nothing to hide." My sibling swallowed hard. The conversation shifted after that. People became cautious, less accusatory. My aunt suggested we take a break. My cousin excused himself to get water. My mom watched me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You seem calm," she said. "I am," I replied. Because the longer this went on, the more obvious it became who was nervous and who wasn't. When the meeting ended, no conclusions were reached, no apologies offered. But something had changed. The certainty was gone. As people stood and gathered their things, my sibling lingered near the hallway. I felt them behind me before they spoke. "Hannah," they said quietly. I turned. They smiled, but their eyes were wet. "You know I'd never do something like that, right?" I held their gaze. "I know," I said. It wasn't a lie. They relaxed instantly, relief washing over their face like they had been holding their breath for days. That was the moment I knew I was right. Back home, I opened my folder one more time. I added notes from the meeting. Who spoke? Who avoided speaking? Who suggested involving the bank and then immediately regretted it? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, because when people are guilty, they don't fear being confronted. They fear losing control of the story. And soon, the story would no longer belong to them. The bank meeting happened on a Wednesday morning. Neutral location, neutral walls. A small room that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. My parents sat on one side of the table, shoulders stiff, expressions rehearsed. My siblings sat beside them, hands folded so tightly their knuckles had gone pale. I sat across from them, alone. That detail mattered more than I expected. The bank representative introduced herself and explained the process calmly, like this was just another case file. Missing funds, timeline review, verification, no emotion, no assumptions. Facts only. I watched my parents relax slightly at that. They trusted systems. They trusted authority. They trusted anything that sounded official more than they had ever trusted me. The representative pulled up the account history on the screen. "Let's start with the withdrawals in question," she said. Dates appeared, amounts, locations. I didn't speak. Neither did my sibling. My dad leaned forward. "Those are the ones." The representative nodded. "I'll need to confirm who had access at those times." She looked around the table. "Can each of you tell me where you were on these dates?" My parents answered first. Work, errands, normal things. Then she turned to me. I slid my folder across the table. "I prepared a timeline," I said. My voice didn't shake. It matches my work schedule and location data. She accepted it, surprised but appreciative. Thank you. She didn't look at my sibling yet. She reviewed my documents quietly, comparing them to the screen. Her brow furrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but concentration. These align, she said after a moment. My mom shifted in her seat. So Hannah was not at the transaction locations during the withdrawals, the representative said evenly. The room went very still. My dad cleared his throat. Well, that doesn't necessarily— Let me finish, she said gently. She turned the screen slightly. Now, we also track device access and login behavior, she continued. This account was accessed from a mobile device registered to— She paused, checking the record. Another authorized user. She looked up. My sibling's breath caught, loud enough for me to hear. The representative finally turned to them. Can you tell me where you were on these dates? They opened their mouth, closed it. They started. I don't remember exactly. My mom frowned. What do you mean you don't remember? The representative waited, patient, silent. I was around, my sibling said finally, at home mostly. The representative nodded and typed something in. According to our records, she said, the device used to authorize these transactions was active at your residence, specifically logged in under your credentials. My siblings' hands began to tremble. My dad turned slowly toward them. What does that mean? It means, the representative said calmly, that the transactions were not random. They were authorized intentionally, by someone with direct access. My mom shook her head. There must be a mistake. There isn't, the representative replied. We have multiple confirmation points. The silence that followed felt different from all the others. This one didn't ask me to fill it. My siblings stared at the table. Their shoulders collapsed inward like something heavy had finally been set down. I didn't think it would matter, they whispered. My mom's voice rose sharply. What did you just say? I didn't think it would matter, they repeated, louder this time. I was going to put it back. When? My dad asked. They didn't answer. The representative closed her laptop gently. I'll step out and give your family a moment. When the door shut, no one moved. My mom looked at my sibling like she was seeing a stranger. You let us blame her, she said, not yelling. Worse, quiet. My sibling finally looked up at me. Tears streaked down their face. I thought you'd be fine, they said. You always are. That was it. That was the explanation. I stood up. I am fine, I said. That's why you thought you could let it land on me. My dad rubbed his face with both hands. Why didn't you say anything sooner? He asked me. I met his eyes. You didn't ask the right person. No one argued with that. When the representative returned, the tone of the room had changed completely. No more certainty. No more theories. Just the slow, uncomfortable process of reality settling in. As we left the building, my mom reached for my arm. Hannah, she said, her voice breaking. We owe you— I stepped back. Not right now, I said, because apologies mean nothing if they only come after proof. And for the first time in that family, the truth didn't belong to whoever spoke the loudest. It belonged to the one who waited. No one spoke on the drive home. The car felt smaller than it ever had, like the truth had taken up all the oxygen and left none for excuses. My mom stared out the window. My dad kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white. My sibling sat in the back seat, crying silently, the kind of crying that isn't asking to be forgiven, just waiting to be done. I watched the road pass by and realized something strange. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger needs resistance, and there was nothing left to push against. When we pulled into the driveway, my dad turned off the engine but didn't get out. We need to talk, he said automatically. I nodded. You can. I don't have to. That was new. Inside the house, everything looked the same. Same table where they had accused me, same chairs where my sibling had stayed quiet. Same room where my character had been questioned louder than the facts ever were. My mom sat down heavily. We failed you, she said, I didn't answer right away, not because I disagreed, because I was deciding what I owed them now that the truth was no longer up for debate. You didn't fail me once, I said finally. You failed me consistently. My dad flinched. You didn't ask questions, I continued. You didn't look for proof. You chose the explanation that made your lives easier. My sibling let out a broken sound from the couch. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I know, I said, turning to them. You meant for it to stop with me. That landed harder than yelling ever could. I've spent my whole life being the reasonable one, I went on. The one who doesn't cause scenes? The one who absorbs tension so other people can stay comfortable. My mom wiped her eyes. We didn't know you felt that way. That's because you never stayed quiet long enough to hear it, I replied. Silence followed. Not the kind that waits for forgiveness. The kind that realizes forgiveness isn't the next step. What happens now? My dad asked. I took a breath. Not to calm myself, but to steady a decision that had been forming long before that dinner, long before the accusation. Now, I said, you deal with the consequences. My sibling looked up, panicked. I'll pay it back. I swear. I'll fix everything. I hope you do, I said honestly. But fixing the money doesn't fix what you let happen to me. My mom reached for my hand again. I didn't pull away this time. But I didn't hold on either. I'm not cutting you off, I said. But I am stepping back. My dad frowned. What does that mean? It means I won't defend myself against rumors you don't bother to stop, I said. It means I won't show up just to be doubted. And it means I won't carry blame that isn't mine anymore. My mom's voice trembled. You're punishing us. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself. That night, I packed a bag. Not dramatically, not angrily, just deliberately. As I zipped it closed, I realized something else. I wasn't leaving because they were wrong. I was leaving because even when they were proven wrong, they had almost let it stand. At the door, my mom whispered, I wish you had trusted us. I looked back at her. I did, I said. That's why it hurt. Weeks passed. The money was repaid. The story changed. Quietly, carefully, no announcements, no apologies loud enough to undo the damage. Family gatherings became polite, measured, different. People looked at me differently too, with caution, with respect, with the understanding that I was no longer the easiest version of myself to use. And I was okay with that. One afternoon, my sibling texted me, I'm sorry I stayed quiet. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I know, I typed, but silence still makes choices. They didn't respond, and that was fine, because I had finally learned something no one had taught me growing up. Being calm does not mean being weak. Being quiet does not mean being guilty. And being the one who holds everything together does not mean you deserve to be the one blamed when it falls apart. At that family dinner, they thought the truth would protect itself. It didn't. I did. And once I stopped carrying what wasn't mine, everyone else had no choice but to carry their own.